Good Thursday morning. I'm WBTV First Alert meteorologist Eric Garlick alongside Chief Meteorologist Al Conklin.
Good morning.
What a wild week of weather it's been.
Well, we've had in North Carolina, of course, our fair share of thunderstorms here the last couple of days. We've got more in the forecast for today. We had Chantel, the remnants of that, which unfortunately a loss of life, at least 5 fatalities in North Carolina from that storm on Sunday. But the big weather story, I suppose, besides New Mexico was Texas, where we had just an incredible flood on 4th of July, Eric.
A ton of rain coming down in a short amount of time. There's a lot of factors that went into it and why it was so bad. And we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about why this happened and how it happened so quickly. So that's what we're going to be covering on this edition of the First Alert.
Incredible loss of life there, and unfortunately this is a rinse and repeat kind of a situation, and I don't say that flippantly. It's just that this has happened many times in the past, and unfortunately there was a great loss of life yet again here. We're not here to discuss whether or not watches and warnings and notifications were put in place that should have been or were properly disseminated. What we're talking about is two things, really. We're going to focus on the meteorology and the topography, the geography of the area, because those two things really go hand in hand as to why a flood like this can happen in a place like the hill country of Texas.
Let's start with the geography and topography of this. So those of us not familiar with Texas, on the west half of Texas, really, we start to see the foothills and the elevation increase, and this just happens to be right in this area where the remnants of Tropical Storm Barry were working in, adding a lot of moisture, and that topography just helps squeeze out all of that moisture, something we're familiar with the western North Carolina mountains.
Yeah, in a similar way, you go from the Gulf Coast into what I call a plateau in the middle part of the state. I spoke at length with Chief Meteorologist Chris Suchan, formerly of WBTV, who's Chief Meteorologist at KSAT in San Antonio, so he has firsthand knowledge of this and explained a lot of what the parameters are involved. What you're looking here is an outline. Let's take that full of Kerr County, Texas, which was really the epicenter for this in several communities along the Guadalupe River. But you take air from the Gulf of Mexico, which is just south of this region, and you sort of bring it against this plateau in central Texas. So you're taking air parcels, you're rising them, and they just sort of hover. These storms sort of develop and hover right over this area, this hill plateau area. And unfortunately, when these thunderstorms come down, it makes a big issue here because, again, it enhances the rainfall. And that same terrain also enhances the runoff. So that also is part and parcel of what the issue is here.
Yeah, and it's hard to see the elevation change from this particular vantage point, but notice where all the rivers are. Kind of the tip of that blue arrow eastward is where you have the rivers, and you get into that higher plateau as you head up toward where it says higher terrain, enhanced rainfall. So let's talk about the next setup with this system. In particular, we're going to focus on the lack of rainfall that they had in the area. So extreme droughts, very dry soil, and the makeup of the soil itself.
Yeah, two things there. They were in extreme drought, meaning the ground was baked hard as a rock here. So, of course, anything that initially is going to fall is going to run off. On top of that, this bedrock is limestone there. So you see a lot of caverns, you see a lot of steep cliffs, and you see a lot of hard rocks at the base of all of these, at the terrain level, the base and the valleys. And so that in itself is like almost like concrete or pavement,
exactly.
like a driveway.
Yeah.
And so it just creates this easy avenue for water to flow.
Yeah,
very quickly.
And it's not picking up a lot of the soil
absorbing,
debris,
right.
And it runs right down. So let's talk about in particular where the camp was, and we went ahead and enhanced the topography in the area just to show you kind of what it looks like along the riverbanks. And you can see those high riverbanks on both sides, and then you have the creeks and all of that other stuff. And then on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see where Kerrville was, and that is where this river was running from and to across the area. Al, just, you could see the water's got to go right toward the riverbed, and that's what it's designed to do. Unfortunately, it comes down that hard, it can cause some flash flooding issues.
Yeah, and there are some breaks, some large dams that are there, but there are also a lot of what they call these sort of recreational dams, which really can't hold back very much in the way of any water, any force of water. But they're there to create swimming holes, whatnot, and there are a lot of those. They're just called river breaks. But again, they hold back water until you get a flood like this, and then they release that water all at a very quick time. And so again, as you mentioned, the terrain is steep here. it is rocky, it is hard, and that water runs right off. So the terrain enhances the runoff. It doesn't absorb the rain like it does around here. It basically runs off.
Yeah, and we're just going to follow the river across, and you can see there, really in the center of that, where that river valley is, you can start to see a little bit more populous areas, and this extends all the way east as you head toward Kerrville, and look at all of the homes and businesses and stuff. And this is, unfortunately, in that area, the Guadalupe River. It's known in an area as Flash Flood Alley.
Yeah.
It happens a lot.
It happens a lot. This is a frequent area where these, what Chris mentions is just sort of bomb thunderstorms develop there, and they'll anchor there. And again, for all the reasons we talked about, the water flows right into there. And much like we saw with Helene in western North Carolina, unlike other floods, 1916 and 1940, the population has exploded, particularly post-COVID. And the same thing has happened in Texas. Texas is now one of the most populous states. And in these valleys, which they're great places to live 360 days out of the year, but 4, 5, 6 days out of the year, you have these floods, and they can be very quick risers. And that's what happened here. Chris was telling me the water level literally rose 30 feet in about an hour.
And this was the third highest crest that the river has happened. So this has happened twice.
Yeah, but in Hunt and places back to the west, it's actually the highest.
Yep.
So again, this is a basin, so you had thunderstorms in some areas, not in other areas. But again, this has happened before. This is not new. Unfortunately, in this instance, though, you also think about it, Chris. We had a holiday weekend.
Yep.
Where do people want to go? Right around here, we go to the beach, we go to the mountains. In Texas, they go to the rivers. They go to these little places where they can swim and cool off and recreate. I don't blame them. You wouldn't blame them. You'd do the same thing, right? Unfortunately, your guard's down. You're on holiday weekend. It's the middle of the night. You get these thunderstorms that put down, 15, 20 inches of rain, coming down at a clip of 3 to 5 inches per hour for 3 or 4 hours, and this is the end result.
Unfortunate and very tragic situation, but this is why we tell you, you got to watch out for flash flooding. It's a very deadly thing.
Yeah, so in this instance, again, we don't have a similar setup here. We certainly get flash flooding, but again, our terrain is different. Our soil structure is different. Our types of thunderstorms are different. We don't typically get 20 inches of rain, though there have been instances. I can remember July 1997, and we're in Hickory. There was 13 inches of rain in one morning in July. It can happen, so we want to always be mindful of that. So stick with us here at WBTV. We'll always keep you posted on this version of First Alert. We want to at least focus a little bit on what happened in Texas. Our thoughts and prayers are certainly with the families there impacted, and again, it's an ongoing situation. So we'll keep you posted on that from the news side, and of course on the weather side, our weather team always will be on your side.
Have a great Thursday, and stay tuned for the next edition of the First Alert.